My name is Barbara Pasternak, and I am founder and chair of Diabetes Hope Foundation. This is part 4 of our transition series. Tonight, we will be discussing families supporting type 1 youth with diabetes. And this particular series is very near and dear to me, as I'm a mother of 2 grown adults with type 1 diabetes. But before we begin the program, I am thrilled to introduce you to our co-host this evening, Peter Atkins. Peter.
Good evening. Hello, I am Peter Atkins. I'm the vice chair of the Diabetes Hope Foundation. I developed diabetes when I was 14 years of age. I transitioned to a university from high school that was 1,700 kilometers away from home when I was 18 years old. So I understand the stresses of transitioning. This evening, I'm thrilled to welcome our panelists, 4 mothers, Tracy, Bethany, Denise, and Darlene, who have each been supporting their son or daughter through a major milestone through this transition and during COVID-19. Each panelist has their own story to tell, beginning their child's transition by moving out, to moving back, to moving on, to moving into university, transitioning out of university, managing isolation and relationships during COVID, and then some moving out and into cohabitation with a companion. So I'm going to hand it over to Barb, and we're going to get into some of the questions this evening on our forum. Barb.
Thank you, Peter. As everyone knows, transitioning is an action-packed word, especially when it comes to youth transitioning from pediatric to adult care, from university to career to in the house, out of the home, moving in and with companions. All these transitions for a mother or father really takes a toll, especially when we've always been helicoptering their care for many, many years. Young adults really intend in many ways to take over the responsibility of transitioning, and all they need is knowledge, confidence, experience, and skills to really succeed. Who would have thought that COVID-19 would prevent the planning and anticipation, as well as this sudden disruption of our youth transitioning today? And as our parents this evening will discuss, how they are in so many different stages of transitioning. Parenting throughout this pandemic definitely has its moments. And to young adults with diabetes, it's certainly an additional stress for both. On the flip side, for this inevitable ups and downs, this process can not only be manageable, but it can actually be exciting. Our parents this evening will share in their unique parenting experiences as they push through these uncharted and frustrating times. Since COVID-19 appeared, there are many challenges our families are facing besides the transitioning. Healthcare is now virtual. Graduation and post-secondary is online. Relationships are internet and social media based, kids moving home, kids moving out, and kids moving on. Our 4 panelists will discuss how they're dealing with all of this. So let's welcome our loving and totally committed mothers who will now introduce themselves. And we will start with Tracy.
Hi there. Thanks for having me, Barb, Peter. My name is Tracy Langella. I am the mother of a soon-to-be 23-year-old son. He got type 1 diabetes when he was 15, and he's recently graduated from Western University and is working full-time in our insurance office, in our agency, and he's still living at home. Yeah, that's where we're at. We've completed university and we're in the workforce. He's in the workforce.
Thank you. Denise.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for including me tonight. My daughter was diagnosed with type 1 when she was 10 years old, and she's 24 now, and she went away for university, came home, and started working, and she's been in the workforce for a couple of years. And this past June 1st, was ready to move out and move in with her boyfriend. And so that's where I'm at with the challenges of her moving out during COVID.
Thank you, Denise. Bethany.
Hi, my name's Bethany Wiley. Thank you, Barbara and Peter, for having me on the panel tonight. I'm mom to Logan. Logan is 18 years old, but just turned 18 in April. And he was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and celiac disease in 2013. So he was 11 when he was diagnosed. So grade 12 graduate, about to enter university. So as if there wasn't enough scariness ahead, we are in the midst of that through COVID-19 and facing online schooling and a bunch of changes that we didn't anticipate. So very challenging, very different. You know, right from grade 12 without a graduation. So it's been very, very different.
Thank you, Bethany. Darlene?
Good evening, everybody. Hi, I'm Darlene. Thanks also for having me on. It's a great time to chat about transition. And Barb, you said it was action-packed. It certainly is a ride. We have 2 daughters, and our eldest, Elise, was diagnosed with type 1 when she was just in grade 7. So lots of transitions through middle school and high school. And she had a very successful transition to the University of Guelph and has just finished her 3rd year. So she's been in residence and then moved into apartments and moved around, and lots of transitions to talk about.
That's great, Darlene. So this is quite interesting because all you mothers have so many situations, and some of you have surpassed some of the existing transitions as some of these mothers are still trying to navigate. So my first question to all of you is, parenting a young adult with diabetes and transition can be quite challenging. What do you think the role of a parent should be through the child's current phase of transition? Bethany, let's start with you. Brave Bethany.
Yeah, brave for sure. Well, I think the hardest thing probably, or what we're looking to do that we haven't done before, is get Logan a lot of independence without, I want to be there for the support for him, but I don't want to be a helicopter parent. I don't want to still be doing the things that he needs to do now when he's going to university. So we've had the discussions, and it's, you know, it's different. He's got a lot of things to do on his own, but I'll be here to support him when he needs it. And if he says, Mom, help, I'll be there, but trying to push and just get him to do things on his own.
So independence is number one.
For sure.
Okay. Thank you. Darlene.
I'm going to say our roles are sort of have foundations in, you know, love and respect and partnership. And maybe one significant role of a parent during transition I was sort of reflecting on is maybe labeling strengths. So we know our kids really well, and sometimes things are challenging and a little bit scary. And I think during a transition is a really great time to label, you know, where somebody's strengths are. Our daughter's she's fabulous, and she's such a great self-advocate, and she's really strategic. On the flip side, she also knows that she's not the most organized. So labeling her strengths and then being able to kind of step in and support those bits that are maybe a little bit more challenging for her, like organizing meds and various things, I can sort of step in and do that, but we're very much in a partnership.
Partnership is the most important piece for sure. Thank you. Tracy, your take.
I think at this transition point that we are at, since Connor's graduated from university and working full-time now for a year, I have stepped back one more time. So for me, my role right now is obviously COVID, making sure that we addressed some concerns there, in the workforce and at home, making sure that anxiety level wasn't too high, and we did our research. But for me, it's, again, stepping back and out of the role of looking after, prescriptions and doctor's appointments, and just making sure that I'm completely sitting on the sidelines. So independence, complete independence. Obviously, he's 23 years old, and I'm there for phone support and conversations. But he at this point should be looking after 99% of his day. But emotional support.
Thank you, Tracy. Denise.
All of those points, and like Tracy, Carly's at the age where she's moved out and she's really leading her diabetes support. So I've completely removed myself because physically she's no longer living with me. So I'm at the edge of the end of her diabetes support. I'm there to talk and to be there for her any way I can, but she's really taken the lead. So I'm very proud of her.
That's amazing. So you've gone through all the stages of transition from university to the workplace to out. Moving out. It's amazing. Okay, from a parent's perspective, because we all know that it's very challenging to be a parent with a child during these current transition, and especially during COVID. What do you think do you think that your kids are actually ready to make that transition? I mean, just your personal feeling, knowing all the strengths and weaknesses that they do have and the support you're giving them. I know it's kind of like a personal opinion, but Bethany, what do you think?
I think Logan's always been very self-sufficient, so I think we're lucky that way. He's always been kind of a determined young guy, even from the get-go when he was diagnosed. So he's really embraced everything. Is he nervous? Yes, it's first year, it's different circumstances. He's wondering how he's going to find peers and that sort of thing because this is going online, never mind kind of finding a diabuddy. So there's a lot of challenges, but he's looking forward to it, and he's very good with things on his own. I have to do very little, so I think he's going to be able to make that transition fairly easily.
That's great. Darlene, any thoughts?
Just sort of thinking back to Elise's, the major transition to university. And it's interesting how with type 1 diabetes, I mean, obviously Elise is the one who is managing this and coping on a day-to-day basis, but it does involve the whole family. And I think back to how my husband and I actually had very different views on how this was going to go. And he's very cautious and was very concerned about lots of issues and was pretty sure she was going to be home again in about 2 weeks. And I really had to hold that hope that she would, make this transition, and with our support and with good connections at the university would just, step into it and do well. So, it's not easy, and people probably have different feelings. Elise was certainly very anxious, but I think we, tried to have that vision, and she, like I say, kind of rose to the occasion and had a lot of, not without ups and downs, but had a lot of success. So having hope seemed to help get us through that transition.
Sounds very optimistic. Now with Tracy and Denise, they've made those major transitions. So do you ladies have anything to add? I mean, they're obviously successful in where they are currently.
Should I go first?
Sure.
So I would say that, I felt that he was prepared for university and felt that he was prepared to handle the challenges that we thought or would come about being away in London for 4 years. And I do think that he handled different challenges, whether it was illness or accommodations with exams or shopping or cooking, any of those things that happened being away for 4 years. And all in all, I would say that he managed it quite well. He makes good decisions, but the idea was that I needed to be there for those phone calls and those questions and those doctor's appointment follow-up questions and dialogue. For me, it's really, I've always just had to be there as a confidant when it came to the middle of the night or whenever he needed to run something by somebody. But I do think that he was equipped to handle those transitions at university and now in the workplace. But we had a lot of help along the way.
That's great. Sounds very positive. Denise, do you have anything to add?
You know what, I just want to say when I'm listening to all you ladies and your kids and all that. I remember going through all of the transition periods and being so nervous and so concerned and wanting to be prepared and do everything right. And now that and so I commend you, all of you, for, being as brave as you are. But now that my daughter has moved out, and she is a very private person, I was always, when she lived at home, she was close. So I didn't worry about all of the transitions. But now that she's out on her own, I worry that she's a very private person. She doesn't let anybody know about her diabetes. So that's a concern. Like, how does she transition? How does she really come out and take care of herself and let other people, new people, know who are around her? Because I'm no longer the parent watching over her, because she's on her own. So,
but she's with her partner.
So it's I still feel like we transition from, one situation into the next, but
right.
Yeah.
So that's an excellent segue into our next question. And Denise, I'm going to stay with you because you've touched on a lot of this already. And that is, since a few of our panelists are experiencing some empty nest at the moment with respect to children with diabetes, the question is, what worried or worries you currently most about your child moving to university or away from home? And then second part of it, and you can answer it at the same time, is what have you done to establish a system of communication with that child? So Denise, you start, because you've touched on a lot of this already.
Well, what worries me the most about the current situation is, now that she's moved out and she's going into stores and going shopping and setting up her home, and it's just all the contact and with strangers and being in stores and being downtown and the lifestyle. And, if she gets into trouble, what do we do? What does she do? And just the thought of having that conversation with her about, don't be afraid to go. If you have to go to the hospital, don't be afraid, you're not going to get COVID. But, having that open, she knows that she can call me at any time, because I'll always have my phone available. But she does have a good partner that she's moved out with. And I really have the confidence that they are going to do everything they can to stay safe. But that's a concern, is being out in the public and being so close to a lot of the downtown core and people.
Tracy, would you speak to this now?
Yeah, I think initially when we were bombarded with all of the information about COVID in March, and we started to, go into that social distancing and everything, everything you read says diabetes, 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 and you start to you think about everybody, older people, and all the risk with COVID, and then you start to look at your family. And I remember that was, at this stage for me was, what can we learn how much can we learn about COVID, and obviously, like all of us, but as far as respect to the diabetes, because every article you opened up talked about diabetes. So my biggest concern during this transition, probably in 2020, everything was going along great until we started to think, is this, how much of an extra risk is this for Connor? And what does that mean until we all know where we're at? Does he stay in the house for, 6 weeks? Obviously, COVID for us has been a challenge in the last year. Before that, university, the biggest challenge with him being away was, living alone, shopping, eating, drinking, staying up, not having access to certain things we all worry about for our kids, no matter what grade they're in, or sugar and all that kind of stuff. So when he was away, those were my worries. It seems this year, the worry is just about how COVID would affect him maybe differently than anyone else in our family. So those have been my issues. And we just communicate, talk to the doctor, ask questions, and do our best to share.
Great advice. Bethany, why don't we go to you because you're at sort of a different stage.
Well, we're fortunate because Logan, for his first year anyway, will be at home. So what a time to be at home when COVID's going on. I guess if you've got to be home 1 year, that's the year to be home. But I think probably the biggest worry is when things do return to some form of normal, and he is with students at the school if that's coming, and hopefully that's coming, rather than everything being virtual. But it's the old saying, beware of the company you keep. I want to make sure he's hanging out with the right crowds. It's going to be a completely different crowd from high school. People are coming from all over. So your friends that were your friends in high school aren't going to be there. And there's going to be new peers. And it's a concern to really think about, he's always had very good judgment, but you worry about that, I guess. Whose car is he jumping into? Whose house is he going to go to? That kind of thing. And, is he going to let people know that he has type 1 and that some scary scenarios can happen from time to time? So,
yeah. Darlene.
Definitely similar fears around COVID, and at least, the risks associated there for someone with type 1. But I'm just going to go back. I think my biggest fear is still around nighttime lows. And just, when Elise was home and in high school, she could just holler and I would hear that in my sleep and come running down the hall and be supportive. And, for that transition to university, that was really hard to imagine her being on her own and managing. And I certainly got lots of late night phone calls and did coaching on the phone, but just kind of giving that space for her to go off and again, trust her strengths, that she was organized and would keep what she needs in her room and would talk with other people and build her network of support at Guelph. But I can say as a parent, that was not an easy one to navigate. And I think I still worry about that to some degree. And maybe COVID, we're sort of less mobile than we used to be. So not being able to kind of run to her side always sits with me as a challenge. And I think we just try to keep the communication open, and I try to be encouraging and supportive. And she knows that she can always reach out to me if she's having a bad day or had a bad low or needs some moral support.
So Darlene, you've touched on COVID. Everybody's touched on COVID somewhat during this. So with the COVID being a reality at the moment, and it has forced the dynamics and living conditions to change within our families. So kids have come home to study and work, and kids have had to move back home with parents. So the question is, how has this change impacted the relationship between you and your child? The added stress and questionable habits that you don't agree with, and their diabetes management. So Darlene, why don't you continue with that?
Sure. Because Elise went off to university and she was quite comfortable, moved into an apartment. And when COVID-19 hit, she did come home. We sort of felt like, let's gather the family and everybody. We didn't kind of know where this was going. And she was home, and that was actually great to have her under the roof. And we have another daughter as well. So we had some really nice, just a kind of a nice opportunity for family connection. One thing that Elise had scheduled though was she was in, her lease was up at the end of April, and she was moving to a new apartment in May. So we definitely had to navigate how we would make a move during COVID. And that I think was stressful. And again, for different members of our family had different feelings about, we sort of kept our tight family of 4 bubble, but then that started to expand a little bit to include some roommates and boyfriends. Right. So I think open communication, we just all kind of through those dinners around the table shared how we were feeling and what this would mean for different members of the family. And then just really trusted Elise at 21 to make an adult decision about where she needed to be living at this time to finish out her school and to manage this apartment transition.
Tracy, I'll ask you then. What about the COVID change?
So the COVID change is getting a little easier now for all of us, I think, because we understand it. But in March, when all the changes work-related happened, we were working together. Connor was working in my office. And when we realized that, you know, quickly everybody was going to be working from home, I noticed a sense with him that it was, okay, well, like, I'm leaving today. And so all of a sudden it was like, I realized that this is affecting him a little more than the rest of us because, you know, he's worried about the underlying condition of type 1. So for him to, you know, come home to work immediately, he took it very seriously. Obviously, our whole family did. But for him, I noticed that, you know, obviously he wasn't going to the store, he wasn't doing anything like that. I mean, he just, you know, got online and he was social, worked every day from home. He has a girlfriend who he loves dearly, but they didn't see each other for probably 6-7 weeks. Or his friends or anything like that. He just said, until we know what's going on, I don't go anywhere. I'll go for walks, I'll jog. You know, he did his workouts and he worked and he gamed with his friends and got social all night. But, you know, for him, he was, you know, until we know where this is going, I'm not going to get sick until we all know what we need to do to prepare. So that was a big deal for us till about May 7th. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Bethany.
Well, again, different situation, but Logan's always, there isn't really anything I'm too concerned about in how he's managing. We're not butting heads or anything like that. The anxiety has been heightened, obviously, since this started. Logan suffers from anxiety to begin with, but certainly heightened during all of this. And, you know, he's just wondering, well, how does college or university work online? So, you know, it was scary thinking about going and attending classes, and then it was flipped to, oh, I'm not going to classes. So I think, you know, not much is going to change for his diabetes regimen as long as we're doing things virtually because he's already at home. So luckily we get along. We're best friends. That can be good and bad, I guess. And everything seems to be okay for him. The work thing, he was working part-time, but he has been off. He's going back in July and he's nervous as heck about it because he works in long-term care. So, you know, as it stands now, he'll go, but we'll see as we get closer.
Yeah. And I mean, as you know, I'm an emergency services worker and I also have diabetes. And I respond, you know, a couple of times a day to incidents at which people have been exposed to COVID-19. So I'm living in that environment every single day. So for me, I understand the concern that each of your kids have about having this disease and being exposed to this. And you do have to be very careful, particularly when you have an underlying condition like we have. So I appreciate the situation, that is for certain. So I'm going to hand it back over to Barb and let her carry on with the next section.
I just wanted to go back a few more questions and address this to Peter. Even though it's been a few years since you transitioned to your university, and I know things have changed a lot, but if you can think of one thing that was causing you stress or causing your mother or father stress, can you just identify that?
You know, we really did think it in advance. And so one of the things that's kind of puzzled me in reading our transition guide and having an understanding of what universities offer to young people with diabetes, one of the things that is requested by a lot of young people who have diabetes is a private room in residence. And I understand that from a privacy standpoint. But I have to tell you, one of the great things that gave my parents a lot of relief and me was that I went to university with a friend of mine who I had gone to high school with, and he was actually quite focused on medicine as a career, and we were roommates together. And so I always had somebody who was a friend who was looking out for me. And I think that was one of the great benefits for me, for my parents, excuse me, knowing that there was somebody else looking out for me when they weren't around. And so I would say that, you know, finding people like that, and I think Bethany spoke to it, you know, it's all about the friends. You know, you shouldn't have to hide this from anybody. People who are your friend will accept you for absolutely what you are. And, you know, having friends like that is beneficial for so many reasons, your diabetes just being one of them. So
That's great. Having a buddy is the most important thing. And if I could just reflect back when my kids went to McGill, the party university of the century, Jesse lived in a residence by himself and Bobby lived in residence with a buddy. So it was beyond any kind of anxiety that I remember having, especially when they both decided to join a fraternity, both of them. And especially when I would call my older son and, you know, ask him how he is, because traditionally they're supposed to call it once a week and never heard, had to call the dawn. Is my son still alive, or, you know, is he somewhere? I don't know. So I think it's always, and I believe this and I advocate this, you have to have a buddy. You need someone who knows exactly what to do to help you through those difficult times. Yes, Darlene.
Oh yeah. Oh, and can I just add too that I totally agree with that. Like finding your peers and your support network is really fabulous. And I know, just want to share, like for Elise, it wasn't easy and automatic. I know that some young people go off to university and boy, that roommate they have first year, they're, you know, buddies from day one. Or the room that they land in is just the right room. And it wasn't that way for our daughter. And she had to move actually a couple times within residence and then in apartments to kind of find, you know, what was the right atmosphere. She actually benefited from having a private washroom and a kitchenette in her suite, like the physical stuff. But it was finding just the right roommates who did get her and understand her and could be supportive. And it didn't happen immediately, but she had enough perseverance to kind of, you know, move around a little bit and then find that niche. So just wanted to share that with young people who may be starting out, that don't worry if you don't get it the first time, just keep going. You'll find your groove.
Diabetes is a disease of perseverance. Yeah. And you speak well to exactly that point. So that's terrific.
I just want to change this up a little, and I just want to go back 12 weeks ago when we launched our first webinar. It was really because we were addressing the angst and the frustration and the confusion and the anxiety of all our diabetes community, our alumni who were talking about it on social media. They were just so overwhelmed with anxiety that they didn't even know how to deal with not graduating, not going to your last day of high school, all these things that were still questionable and nobody really knew what the next day brought. So obviously anxiety and mental health, I call it mental health, is a big, big topic, especially for our youth who probably suffer it all the time, from burnout, from just being constantly having to deal with their diabetes. So can you address have you addressed these concerns with your child at all? And if you've noticed that they're more anxious or more depressed or just expressing more emotional outbursts than usual? Darlene, you can start with that one.
Yeah, just to be really honest, you know, Elise is a wonderful person. And, you know, depression is kind of under the surface for her, and anxiety. So all of these changes and COVID, and for her, it was really the loss of some great summer plans. She was going to be hiking with a group of teens who have type 1 diabetes. She had a really great job lined up. She was just starting to, you know, really enjoy her social network in Guelph and doing great in class. So when it hit and all of these things started slipping away, I know that she felt really down and anxious about COVID and what was happening. I work in a hospital, and she was worried about what I might be bringing home. And so it was, I can honestly say I can relate, and it was a really hard time. I think as a family, we just tried to, you know, be thoughtful, listen to each other, Fortunately, Elise is someone who likes to share. So we had lots of, time on the sofa to chat and, really kind of acknowledge the losses that happen, but at the same time, look for, the positive time, more family time, changes, new experiences might emerge. So yeah, I'm trying to think about what we did, but just recognize that it was real and those losses were real. But this is life, and, look for those opportunities to carry on and find ways to, if we can't be together with peers and boyfriends, socializing in different ways, networking and connecting.
Bethany?
I think the anxiety part was really hard at the beginning of COVID. It was kind of like a real slap. Unfortunately, right at the very beginning, so this was at the beginning of March, I was sitting in a parking lot and got a call from public health saying that Logan and I had both been exposed to someone who tested positive, and of all things, it was at a diabetes event. So of course, panic sunk in, and I said, what are you talking about? Who is it? They didn't want to give you any information. It was all very private. And, at that point, I'm sure they're handling it different now, but at that point they said, where are you? I said, I'm in a parking lot. And they said, you have to go home immediately, grab your son from school. Public health will call you tomorrow with further instructions. And that was it. So you can imagine the kind of panic. And I thought, oh boy. And then I thought type 1 diabetes, and we were both exposed, and he was probably right beside the person. So it was really tough. He was beside himself too. So we waited that 2-week period. Both were fine. But after that, it was really the constant media stuff coming from all angles about this disease. And like Tracy was saying with type 1 diabetes, it was everywhere. So we just decided to turn off the media and just check in once a day for 5 minutes, get the update, and that was it. So, and that helped tremendously because the anxiety was through the roof for both of us, actually. So, we talked as much as we could. We went for walks. He tried to connect with friends online, anything to sort of not see it coming at you from every direction. And that helped tremendously.
I think that was very smart to turn off the media, because the more news that we hear, the more anxious we become. And things haven't really changed much in the last couple of months. So other than bad news, I agree. I don't watch the 11 o'clock news anymore. Tracy, your thoughts?
So it's interesting because I was just thinking, listening to everybody's story, and I often think, oh, well, we're just working and, maybe it's not as stressful as university. But when I think about COVID and I think about the fact that we just went full speed ahead into our work, insurance industry is an essential service. So we worked nonstop. We worked every day listening to people's stories about COVID. And I remember Connor was, obviously working very hard every day, but it was COVID all day, 8 hours a day. And, thinking back, I know that just amplified it even more because he had to talk to everybody on the phone about their life and their worries and their bills and everything to do with COVID. So I do think that working and talking about COVID 8 hours a day and the job was extremely busy for those 2 months, and talking about COVID and worrying about himself through every single conversation he was having with our clients. His worry was probably a little more anxiety and stress talking to all of those people than me even, because, he's got that extra little worry. And so when I think about work during that time, even though we were home and, really enjoying family and trying to talk about all the positives and, it's fine and, all those things, I do think that his job that he was doing was exposing him to continuous dialogue about COVID for like probably 8 or 9 hours a day. And he made it through that, but it was tough.
That's great. Thank you, Tracy. Denise, anything to add?
Well, I think that when COVID set in and my daughter being independent, running downtown, she works in media and advertising, and she's very much works late nights and a lot of social stuff going on, and being able to go to the gym and just being so active to just stopping was very stressful, trying to figure out where to fill in the time. But again, what Tracy said about the work, that because kids are on computers, and if they're able to work from home or even study, it's nonstop being on the computer screen, and that's sort of overtaken all the extra time that they used to have to do other things. So it's been, that's a lot of stress and anxiety right there, and learning how to find a new balance with their lives. I think I had a lot of anxiety because I knew that the time was ticking down, that my daughter was moving out, where she was actually had something positive to look forward to. So it was a huge transition for both of us. I probably had more anxiety than she did in the end. But here we are. And I guess the question is, how do we move forward? How do we find that new balance of life, especially when it's so limited? It can be.
I think we're all still searching for that final answer, for sure.
Denise touched on the word independence, and that's sort of the theme of the next question. And we all know, in order to be successful during this transition, one of the key components is to be a self-advocate. So go to Tracy, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, Connor has always been very vocal about, you know.
I like him already.
Yeah, he's always been that kid, you know, hey, teacher. So yeah, he's that kind of guy who he has no problem, you know, the waiter, when he was a little kid, he can ask for what he needs to ask for. But I think that, you know, at university, it was a big deal to make sure that you got the accommodation for extra time, and, you know, making sure that that was, you know, you were independent. He was independent enough to know that I'm not going to be calling up to book that for you. You need to do that. I think, you know, at knowing when to, you know, he's got to get over to the hospital in London when he was there at university. I mean, I felt that he could handle it all. We'd have a quick conversation, but he'd take it on himself. You know, anytime something came up where he had to advocate for himself to get help or advice, he's always been a little bit outspoken, so it wasn't hard for him to advocate for himself. But the, you know, the typical independence of order your supplies, you know, you've got your appointment, I shouldn't have to remind you about your endo appointment. I mean, typical things. But I think that he definitely has a very vocal personality, and he's assertive. And I've just always said from the get-go, you know, you tell everybody that you have diabetes wherever you are, and that's just a fact. And funny enough, if I could just say one quick thing, when we were talking about having a buddy at university, after we got off our previous call, I could hear Connor on the phone with his roommate, and they haven't been living together for a year, since last April. And he was saying to him, you know, buddy, who knows what would have happened to me at university without you, how many times you were there for me. And I'm not sure if it's because I've been talking about this that he made that call, but I was just like, oh my gosh. And he was actually thanking him, because I said, I don't think you ever have. And he said, yeah, all the nights we looked for a blood tester and a juice box. He said, you know, his buddy's thinking that that's what he did. Where's your blood tester? Oh my God, it's 4 a.m. We'll find it. And it was just, when you were mentioning that, Darlene, I was just like, you know, I just heard it firsthand. You know, he was just thanking him. So, I mean, you know, you gotta have a buddy. You gotta tell everybody loud and just say what you need. And fortunately, you know, he'd get my advice, but he would take care of it.
Bethany, why don't you speak to the independence?
Well, again, a different situation in that Logan is still, believe it or not, at 18, because COVID hit right when he was supposed to be transferring to the adult clinic. He's still with the pediatric clinic. So we're kind of in limbo there. But there's been a lot of things that he's been doing, you know, the last couple of months, and actually for a while on his own, because he mentors young kids, like 4 or 5-year-olds who have type 1 diabetes. So when he's talking to them and working through some stuff with them, he's hearing it himself. So he's actually picked up on things very quickly, and is now doing things like making better use of the Clarity and the pump reports, and adjusting his insulin on his own without having to be, you know, without having to have somebody tell him to do it or look at it and suggest things. The big thing for him, I think, with going forward, just because he is between the two clinics, he's going to have to advocate to get this paperwork transferred. The disability tax credit, he turned 18. He's going to have to now deal with that, deal with, looking into an endocrinologist who does that paperwork, because apparently not all of them do that paperwork.
No.
So he's got a lot of stuff ahead of him that he's tackling, and he's got a list, and he's working with the kids all the time. So it prompts him and he reminds him of things. But he's kind of taken the bull by the horn, so to speak, and he'll get there.
Great. Darlene, will you speak to the independence question?
Sure. Well, you raised the point around self-advocacy, and similar to Tracy, we're very fortunate that Elise is feisty and happy to chat and happy to kind of stand up and let people know what she needed. So she stepped into that role quite easily. But around transition, I think we sort of took the approach of, yes, we're building her independence with lots of scaffolding and support, boosting her up with her strength, but stepping in where there are challenges, and really thought about it a lot as interdependence. So never kind of expected her to do it all on her own all at once, but just like in increments when she was ready to sort of take on new and additional roles. So moving away from home and sleeping overnight independently and living away from home was one aspect of independence. Definitely, managing appointments and various things. I don't know what it is, young people sometimes don't want to pick up the phone and call and make an appointment. So she didn't want to do that. I would step in and kind of do that a little bit longer than maybe I should have, but that seemed to help her take the lead in other areas. And then as she built her skills, now she's at the point where she's more comfortable making her appointments and remembering her appointments. So I guess it was a phased process, and we didn't try to take it on all at once.
I want to add something, if you don't mind. We last week we had the clinicians on. We had 2 diabetes educators and 2 social workers working in pediatric diabetes. And the consensus is that, number one, the kids have more to do now because it's on virtual. The kids are on virtual appointments. And for the disability and all the paperwork that has to be signed now that gives them that transition acceptance, or it gives them that official transition, it is a lot more follow-up. And so it just gives more work for our kids. And it's just, the parents always behind the kids. Did you do this and do that? And it's just, there's a lot more that the kids have to really think about now during COVID, because things are not the same. It's not normal. There's no normalcy there. Some of the clinics are delaying their transition 6 months. Some clinics adult clinics aren't taking kids in a transition mode. So things are changing, things are in flux. It's not normal. So kudos to you, to Bethany and Darlene, I guess. Well, she's already transitioned, but it's very difficult there right now. It makes it difficult for the
kids. I will. Oh, sorry. I'll just quickly add. Actually, Elise was right in the process of transitioning between teams from one organization to another. Just her needs had changed, and right when COVID hit, so she was just completely up in the air without a diabetes team, and that was challenging. But yeah, she's stepping in and starting to make appointments through virtual care, and that might suit her quite well, especially being away from home. That may give her some new opportunities.
That's great.
Can I just add something?
Certainly.
So I guess you stumped me with the independence question, because Carly seems to be so different than the personalities of your children, where my daughter was always very private with her diabetes. So she always did everything herself. She wouldn't let me give her needles. She started at 10. And even, so she went through high school and university being a private person, never telling people that she had diabetes. And Darlene talked about working with your child's strengths, and I had to realize very early on that she's a very independent person, very private person, and I had to respect that. And even though I'd say, you have to advocate for yourself, you have to tell people you have diabetes, like, she looked at me like, it was horrible. Like, it's like, this is my personal business. So even as a young adult, when she transitioned from diabetes care from pediatrics to adult care, even though I would drive her to an appointment or I'd sit there in the hallway, she's always been very private. For her, her independence was early, and if she has any diabetes questions, she'll go right to her doctor. And if I ask her, what's your reading, or if I even dare to do that, she would just say, you know, that's my business, and not to be a negative, but as a positive. Yeah. She takes care of it. I had to learn very early to step back and let her lead and be there as a support. So I just wanted to add that, you know, every personality is so different. And it's really interesting hearing all about your kids and so how they Denise, manage and how we manage.
The last point here then that we're trying to make is to ask each of our panelists, please now bear in mind that given that everybody here tonight is a parent and we have really spoke about the parent perspective, I'd like you to give everybody who's online tonight one takeaway piece of advice. And you can speak to either the parent of somebody with of a child who has diabetes, or even speak to the young person with diabetes, and the piece of advice that you would give them that would just better the relationship.
I just want to add, we have 7 minutes left, so it has to be quick because we have to wrap this up soon.
Okay, yep.
It's gone so fast.
Okay, Denise, you finish. You touched on most of it there, I think, but just close it up there with one.
So I think that you have to always be positive and know at the end of the day that everything is going to be okay. There might be struggles. You learn best from your mistakes, unfortunately. But if you really believe that your child will be successful in every transition, they know it, they feel it, and they will be successful. And that's it.
Bethany, can I ask you for the one piece of take-home advice?
I think let them be who they are, and just be the safety net when they need the safety net. Let them spread their wings. It's very, very difficult. I still cry, you know, on and off. And he was diagnosed in 2013. So it's never going to go away for me, and it doesn't go away, I know, for most parents, but I think you have to just let them be. They'll get there. They're tougher than we realize. He's much tougher than I am, much tougher. And, you know, he's working with kids that have it, and he's like, hey, I got it. It's not a big deal. You know, and I think probably I made more of a deal out of it than he did. So I have to let him go and just be there if he needs a safety net.
Yeah. Darlene, takeaway advice.
Hard to put it in one or two words, but just, I think, keep the lines of communication open, whether it's between parents and youth, or youth like with your friends, or someone you respect in your on your healthcare team. But let's just keep talking to each other. And for young people who have type 1, know that there are people out there that are like rooting for you and are cheerleaders. So just keep chatting and keep connecting.
And Tracy, one bit of take-home advice?
I would say, obviously, communicating and sharing and positivity, and not letting one event, one high blood sugar, one illness, one COVID news story, anything, one bad night at university, anything, nothing. Tomorrow's a new day. It's going to be fine. We're going to get through it. They already have enough stress, looking at that meter every single minute, and, you know, it's like being on the scale all day. I never, ever show my emotion, worried, you know, to him. You know, it's all going to be okay, because it's the big picture here, that nothing, you know, obviously day to day, but, you know, management, but, you know, not to doom and gloom. They have enough stress. Nobody needs to worry and panic over one day of diabetes.
Yep. Good advice. Good advice.
Long haul.
Barb, I'm going to hand it over to you.
So I first want to tell you that you're all fantastic, and you're all heroes, and you're all champions. And we have some wonderful chat reinforcements from how these kids who are talking on the chat line saying that I don't know how I would have done it without my mom or my parents. The other thing is I just, this is so reflective of how when my kids were young, how I felt, and I was certainly a helicopter mother. I thought this was the end of the world. And then your kids teach you, because we think we have diabetes. We're living it through them, but actually they're the ones who have it. They're living. It's their body. They know how they feel. So I really believe that the confidence and love and nourishment that you're giving them gives them the strength and the courage and the knowledge and the strength to really continue to be as great as they are. Number one, they all got scholarships. So just remember, they're the top 5% in Canada of kids who applied for scholarships. So they are amazing kids, and truly they are. And you're amazing parents. Truly you are. And if there's just a few words that I like to say, and coming from all of your comments, you talked about unconditional love, encouragement, reassurance, and strength. So these are all independence. These are all wonderful words that will get them through every day, every minute, every hour. So with the advice and stories from all of you this evening, I say you're not alone. Keep on, carry on, and keep calm. My kids always say, Mom, just chill out. And and now I'm very proud to say that my kids are older. They are fathers, they have families, and they have their own kids. So, when they stepped into a relationship and had their partners, like Denise has, my job was done. I was done. As long as I knew that when I saw my kids, they were smiling and they were happy, I was happy and smiling too. So that's really all I have to say, except there's one piece of advice I want to give, that we have a very strong mentorship program and diabetes buddy system program. We've been doing it for over a decade, and we've matched up over 500 people, youth who still have relationships, are carrying on, they're still friends. So I would suggest you log on to diabeteshopefoundation.com and under the mentorship program. And if anyone out there needs more information, all you have to do is fill out the application, and within 24 hours, your child will be matched up with a buddy. So thank you all, and I'm going to send it off to Peter.
We want to give a big thank you to our sponsors for the webinar series, Omnipod, Tandem Diabetes Care, Aubrey and Marla Dan Foundation, very supportive, Jeremy and Judith Friedman Family Foundation, great supporters of our cause, and our esteemed board of directors, which Barb and I are two. And we have been sponsors of this, not only in our time and our effort, but our financial contribution as well. So we're a sponsor of this evening. I want to say, of course, a special thank you to our panelists this evening for joining us and sharing their parental experiences. This is terrific. We thank our supporters, all of you out there who have given us the confidence and encouragement to continue our Wednesday wellness webinars. Our viewership continues to increase week to week, and for that we are so grateful. 12 weeks ago, we launched our first webinar for the sole purpose of supporting our community who we felt needed a voice to discuss whatever the issues appeared from your messaging on social media. So we hope our 12 weeks of assorted topics have given insight, encouragement, and maybe a few laughs along the way. Next week, please join us again and for some fun and interesting times with our mystery alumni panel.
Actually, it's summer fun in the sun.
Oh, okay, Barb. Okay. And so until then, have fun and always be safe. And thanks for joining us tonight. This was terrific. Good night, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Good night.
Good night.